What if love wasn't part of the equation? What if marriage was just business? Sounds cold, doesn't it? But for some people, this isn't fiction, it's reality. Today, we're diving into a story that explores what happens when two lives are bound together not by affection but by necessity. A tale where logic reigns supreme until emotion steps in and turns everything upside down. This is a story about power, vulnerability, and the unexpected ways love can bloom even in the most unlikely places. Our protagonist is someone you might relate to, or at least understand. She's a woman who has always approached life with precision and practicality. Relationships, to her, aren't about hearts and flowers, they're transactions. Arrangements. Contracts. And why wouldn't she think that way? Her upbringing taught her there's no room for fairy tales in the real world. Whether it was family pressure, societal expectations, or perhaps scars from past heartbreaks, she learned early on that emotions are messy, and often unreliable. So when her family proposed an arranged marriage, she didn't hesitate. It wasn't about romance or passion. It was about securing alliances, consolidating resources, and maintaining appearances. And here's the twist, her partner wasn't a man, it was another woman. In their world, such unions weren't uncommon. They were strategic moves, designed to strengthen ties, protect legacies, or defy societal norms without rocking the boat too much. But as you'll soon discover, this arrangement wasn't destined to stay purely transactional. Something happened, a moment so small yet so profound, that it cracked the foundation of everything she believed in. You'll hear how an ordinary evening turned extraordinary, how rain became more than just water falling from the sky, and how one kiss changed the course of two lives forever. By the end of this video, you'll have a deeper understanding of how societal structures shape our choices, and how sometimes, humanity finds a way to break through even the toughest barriers. We'll explore themes like identity, self-discovery, and the courage it takes to embrace something as unpredictable as love. Why should you watch till the end? Because this isn't just a story, it's a mirror reflecting parts of ourselves we might not want to admit exist. It's about questioning whether we truly control our destinies or if fate has other plans. Plus, trust us, the ending will leave you thinking long after the screen fades to black. Before we dive deeper, welcome to Your Channel Name, where we bring you stories that challenge your perspective and spark meaningful conversations. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of curious minds. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Now, let's step into this world of calculated decisions and uncontrollable emotions. Imagine yourself sitting across from someone who's become your spouse, not because you chose them out of desire, but because it made sense on paper. How would you feel? What would happen if those carefully laid plans started unraveling? Stay tuned, because the answers lie just ahead, and remember, sometimes the smallest moments hold the biggest truths. Let's find out what happens next. Let's talk about how it all began, the arrangement. It wasn't love that brought them together. No grand gestures, no stolen glances across crowded rooms. Just logistics. Their meeting was deliberate, orchestrated by families who saw an opportunity to strengthen ties and secure futures. They met in a neutral setting, a quiet cafe tucked away in the city, chosen for its discretion. Neither of them had any say in the matter. The protagonist, let's call her Elena, walked in wearing a sharp blazer, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. Across from her sat Clara, her soon-to-be spouse. While Elena exuded control and precision, Clara seemed almost too relaxed, flipping through a sketchbook with ink-stained fingers. That first impression alone hinted at their differences. Elena was calculating, reserved, always thinking 10 steps ahead. Clara, on the other hand, appeared spontaneous, free-spirited, someone who lived in the moment rather than planning for the future. The conversation started formally. They discussed terms, not unlike negotiating a business deal. Who would handle finances? How would household responsibilities be divided? What public image would they project? Every detail was laid out meticulously, leaving little room for ambiguity. There were nods, polite smiles, and occasional clarifications, but no warmth. Nothing personal. Just two people agreeing to coexist under the same roof for mutual benefit. Elena kept her tone professional throughout, though inside, her thoughts churned. Was this really happening? She told herself it was logical, practical, even necessary. But deep down, there was a flicker of something she couldn't quite name. Guilt? Doubt? Or maybe just numbness. This wasn't how she imagined her life turning out, but then again, when did imagination ever align with reality? Clara, meanwhile, didn't push for more. She answered questions calmly, her voice steady, though her eyes occasionally wandered to Elena's hands, which fidgeted subtly with the edge of her sleeve. It was a small detail, one Elena wasn't aware of, but it spoke volumes. Clara noticed things most people overlooked. And while Elena tried to maintain her composure, Clara's quiet observations planted tiny seeds of curiosity in her mind. A few weeks later came the pivotal moment, signing the papers. It took place in a lawyer's office, sterile and impersonal, with stacks of documents spread across a polished mahogany table. As they signed their names, Elena felt a strange hollowness settle over her. Each pen stroke felt heavier than the last, as if she were etching her fate into stone. When the final signature was complete, the lawyer congratulated them with a handshake, his words hollow and automatic. "Congratulations," he said, as if sealing a merger instead of a marriage. The room fell silent after that. Neither woman spoke as they stood to leave. Outside, the air was crisp, the kind that bites at your skin and clears your head. Elena hesitated for a moment before heading toward her car, stealing a glance at Clara. For the first time, she noticed something different about her, something she hadn't seen before. Clara smiled softly at the lawyer as they parted ways, her lips curving upward in a way that seemed genuine, warm, almost radiant. That smile lingered in Elena's mind long after they drove home separately. Why did it catch her attention? Maybe because it was so unlike anything she'd ever shown herself, or anyone else, for that matter. Her own smiles were rare, reserved only for moments when social decorum demanded it. But Clara's? It was effortless, unguarded, like sunlight breaking through clouds. As days turned into weeks, Elena found herself replaying that moment in her head. At first, she dismissed it as irrelevant, a fleeting observation, nothing more. But the more she thought about it, the more it unsettled her. Was it possible that behind Clara's carefree demeanor lay a depth she hadn't considered? Or was she simply projecting her own insecurities onto someone else? Their early days of living together reinforced the divide between them. They moved around each other like strangers sharing space, polite but distant. Meals were eaten in silence, conversations limited to logistics. Yet, every now and then, Elena caught glimpses of Clara's spontaneity, a sudden laugh at a joke only she understood, a burst of energy as she danced barefoot in the kitchen while cooking dinner. These moments threw Elena off balance, forcing her to confront the growing realization that Clara wasn't just a name on a contract. She was a person, with quirks, passions, and perhaps even dreams of her own. One evening, as rain tapped gently against the windows, Elena found herself watching Clara from across the room. She was curled up on the couch, sketching absent-mindedly, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. There was something mesmerizing about the way she focused, completely absorbed in her world. Elena wanted to look away, to retreat back into her carefully constructed shell, but she couldn't. Something about Clara made her pause, a quiet magnetism she couldn't explain. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it marked the beginning of a shift. For the first time since their arrangement began, Elena felt a crack form in the wall she'd built around herself. Not wide enough to let anyone in, not yet, but enough to make her wonder, could there be more to this partnership than she'd allowed herself to believe? Stay tuned, because what happens next will challenge everything Elena thought she knew about relationships, love, and herself. This is where the story starts to change, and trust us, you won't want to miss it. Living together wasn't easy, not that either of them expected it to be. Their days followed a predictable rhythm, almost mechanical in nature. Elena woke up early, dressed impeccably, and left for work before Clara even stirred from bed. By the time Clara emerged, stretching lazily in oversized sweaters, Elena was already gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of coffee and the echo of her heels on hardwood floors. Evenings were no different. They coexisted in silence, occupying separate corners of their shared space. Elena buried herself in reports or emails, while Clara sketched endlessly, occasionally humming tunes under her breath. The house felt like two parallel universes colliding without ever truly merging. Yet, despite the distance between them, small cracks began to form in the facade they'd built around themselves. It started subtly, a glance here, a word there. One evening, over dinner, Clara surprised Elena by speaking about her childhood. She talked about growing up in a bustling household where creativity was celebrated but stability was scarce. Her voice softened as she described how drawing had been her escape, a way to make sense of a chaotic world. "I guess I've always found comfort in creating something beautiful out of chaos," she admitted, her fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth. Elena listened, caught off guard by the raw honesty in Clara's words. For someone who prided herself on control, hearing such vulnerability unsettled her. She wanted to respond, to offer some kind of acknowledgement, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she nodded briefly and changed the subject, steering the conversation back to safer territory. But later that night, lying awake in bed, Elena couldn't shake the image of Clara's hands moving delicately across the paper, bringing life to blank pages. There was a depth to her partner she hadn't anticipated, a complexity that defied Elena's initial assumptions. The cracks widened further when conflict arose. It started innocuously enough, a misunderstanding over finances. Elena had set aside a budget for household expenses, carefully calculated down to the last cent. When she discovered Clara had exceeded it by purchasing art supplies, she confronted her partner with clipped precision. "This isn't sustainable," Elena said, holding up the receipt. "We agreed on limits." Clara bristled, her usually calm demeanor faltering. "And I agreed to live within those limits, but you didn't exactly leave room for things that matter to me," she shot back, gesturing toward her sketches scattered across the living room. Their argument escalated quickly, fueled by pent-up frustrations neither had voiced until now. Elena accused Clara of being reckless. Clara countered by calling Elena rigid and unyielding. Voices rose, then softened, until finally, they both fell silent, staring at each other across the kitchen counter. For the first time, Elena saw the hurt in Clara's eyes, not just from this fight, but from weeks of emotional neglect. And Clara, for her part, recognized the weight Elena carried, the pressure to maintain order in a life that felt increasingly chaotic. In that charged moment, something shifted. Neither apologized outright, but the tension eased slightly, replaced by an unspoken understanding. These moments revealed layers of both women that neither had fully acknowledged before. Elena began questioning her rigid beliefs. Was her insistence on structure really protecting her, or was it isolating her further? Meanwhile, Clara showed signs of longing for connection, not just convenience. Her sketches became more introspective, filled with faces and places that hinted at a desire for intimacy, something deeper than the arrangement they'd settled into. One afternoon, as they sat side by side on the couch, a documentary about rain played softly in the background. The narrator spoke poetically about how rain could symbolize renewal, washing away what no longer served us. Elena glanced at Clara, whose attention seemed fixed on the screen, though her expression betrayed a quiet melancholy. "Do you like the rain?" Elena asked suddenly, surprising herself with the question. Clara turned to her, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Yeah, I do. It reminds me of home, of running barefoot through puddles as a kid." "Why?" Elena hesitated, unsure why she'd asked or what answer she hoped to hear. "No reason," she murmured, looking away. But the memory lingered, the idea of freedom, of letting go, of embracing something unpredictable yet cleansing. As the days passed, these fleeting glimpses of humanity accumulated, chipping away at the walls they'd erected. Elena found herself noticing details she'd overlooked before, the way Clara's laughter lit up a room, the care she put into preparing meals, the quiet strength she displayed even in moments of vulnerability. And Clara, in turn, saw glimpses of softness beneath Elena's polished exterior, a flicker of uncertainty, a rare smile, a moment of genuine concern. Then came the realization that stopped Elena in her tracks. Despite their differences, their opposing approaches to life, their contrasting personalities, they weren't so incompatible after all. Beneath the surface, they shared a longing for something real, something meaningful. What if their arrangement wasn't just a business deal? What if it could evolve into something more? The thought terrified her. Love wasn't supposed to enter the equation. Yet, here she was, entertaining the possibility for the first time. The stage was set for what would come next. That same evening, dark clouds rolled in, heavy with promise. Rain began to fall, tapping insistently against the windows. Elena stood by the glass, watching droplets race each other down the pane. Memories surfaced, childhood storms, whispered wishes, forgotten dreams. She felt a pull, an inexplicable urge to step outside, to feel the rain on her skin, and then she heard Clara's voice behind her. Want to join me? Stay tuned, because what happens next will change everything. The rain becomes more than weather, it becomes a catalyst, a turning point neither of them saw coming. The evening began like any other, but the air carried an electric charge that hinted at something extraordinary. Dark clouds gathered overhead, their weight pressing down on the city as if nature itself was holding its breath. Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and ominous, while lightning streaked across the sky in jagged bursts of light. Streets glistened under the dim glow of streetlights, reflecting the chaos above. The rain started softly at first, a gentle patter against rooftops, but soon intensified into a steady downpour, drenching everything it touched. Elena stood by the window, watching the storm unfold. She'd always found storms mesmerizing, yet unsettling. There was beauty in their unpredictability, but also danger, a reminder that control was an illusion. As she stared out at the rain-soaked world, Clara appeared beside her, holding 2 umbrellas. Come on, Clara said, her voice soft but insistent. We can't stay cooped up forever. Elena hesitated. Stepping outside felt reckless, unnecessary even. But there was something in Clara's tone, something inviting yet challenging, that made her grab one of the umbrellas without protest. They stepped into the rain together, the sound of droplets hitting fabric mingling with the distant rumble of thunder. The streets were deserted, save for the occasional car speeding past, sending waves of water splashing onto the sidewalk. Elena walked slightly ahead, her umbrella shielding her from the worst of the rain, though her shoes were already soaked. Clara lagged behind, twirling her umbrella absent-mindedly, letting stray drops kiss her skin. It wasn't long before they found themselves caught in a heated argument. It had been brewing for days, a culmination of unspoken tensions and unresolved feelings. They argued about nothing and everything, finances, expectations, the suffocating silence between them. Voices rose over the din of the storm, each word sharper than the last. You don't understand me. Clara snapped, frustration boiling over. You never have. And you think I'm some cold, heartless machine who doesn't care? Elena shot back, her voice trembling with emotion. Maybe I am. Maybe this whole thing is pointless. Clara froze, her anger giving way to hurt. Then why are we still here? Why haven't you walked away? The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. Elena opened her mouth to respond but stopped herself. What could she say? The truth was, she didn't know why she stayed. She told herself it was practicality, obligation, the terms of their agreement. But deep down, she knew there was more to it. Something she couldn't, or wouldn't, admit. Before she could find the words, Clara turned and started walking away, her umbrella abandoned on the wet pavement. Elena watched her go, torn between pride and panic. Without thinking, she called out, her voice barely audible over the rain. Wait. Clara paused but didn't turn around. Elena took a step forward, then another, until she was standing just inches away. Her heart pounded in her chest, loud enough to drown out the storm around them. I don't want you to leave, Elena whispered, her voice shaking. Clara finally turned to face her, her eyes searching Elena's for answers neither of them fully understood. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, the rain pouring down around them, soaking through their clothes and blurring the lines between logic and impulse. And then it happened. Elena hesitated, her mind screaming at her to pull back, to retreat into the safety of her carefully constructed walls. But her body betrayed her. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she leaned in. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching into eternity. She saw the surprise in Clara's eyes, the flicker of uncertainty, and then, acceptance. Their lips met, tentative at first, then with growing intensity. The world around them faded, the rain, the thunder, the slick streets, all of it dissolved into nothingness. In that moment, there was only them. Only the heat of the kiss, the electricity coursing through their veins, the undeniable connection that had been simmering beneath the surface all along. When they finally pulled apart, both women were breathless, their faces flushed, their hair plastered to their foreheads. Neither spoke, words felt inadequate, impossible. They simply stood there, staring at each other, trying to process what had just happened. Shock gave way to confusion, then fear. What did this mean? Had they crossed a line they couldn't uncross? Elena's mind raced, grappling with emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. This wasn't part of the plan. Love wasn't supposed to enter the equation. Yet here she was, standing in the rain with her arms still wrapped around Clara, feeling more alive than she had in a lifetime. Clara broke the silence first, her voice barely above a whisper. What now? Elena didn't answer. She wanted to reassure Clara, to promise that everything would be okay, but she couldn't. Because deep down, she didn't know. Everything she believed in, everything she thought she wanted, suddenly felt uncertain. The walk home was quiet, the storm beginning to subside as if mirroring their internal turmoil. They dried off in silence, avoiding eye contact, each lost in their own thoughts. Elena retreated to her room, sitting on the edge of her bed with her head in her hands. Her old worldview, the one built on logic and control, felt fractured, crumbling under the weight of what had just transpired. Could their relationship survive this revelation? Or would fear drive them apart? As the night wore on, Elena replayed the kiss in her mind, dissecting every detail, every emotion. She thought about the warmth of Clara's lips, the way her heartbeat had synced with hers, the flood of feelings she couldn't explain. And for the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't weakness. Maybe it was strength. Stay tuned, because what happens next will test the limits of their bond, and force them to confront the hardest truths about themselves and each other. The days following the rainstorm were anything but calm. While the skies cleared, the storm within Elena only grew fiercer. She retreated into herself, shutting out the world, and Clara, like a fortress under siege. Every moment replayed in her mind, the feel of Clara's lips, the way time seemed to stop, the overwhelming rush of emotions she couldn't contain. It terrified her. Love wasn't supposed to fit into her meticulously planned life. Yet here it was, uninvited and undeniable, threatening to upend everything she believed in. Elena spent hours pacing her room, trying to rationalize what had happened. Was this some kind of mistake? A fleeting lapse in judgment? Or worse, was she losing control of herself? Her thoughts spiraled, each question leading to another without resolution. Could she handle love? Did she even deserve it? These doubts gnawed at her, keeping her awake long after the house fell silent. Clara, too, was struggling. Unlike Elena, who buried herself in introspection, Clara wore her turmoil on her sleeve. She tried to act normal, sketching furiously or humming old songs to fill the silence between them. But beneath her composed exterior, she wrestled with her own fears. What if Elena rejected her outright? What if their kiss had been nothing more than a momentary impulse? The uncertainty weighed heavily on her, leaving her restless and uneasy. Their shared space became charged with tension. Meals were eaten separately, conversations reduced to polite exchanges about mundane details. Neither dared to broach the subject of that night, as if speaking it aloud might make it disappear, or explode entirely. Complicating matters further were the external pressures mounting around them. Word of their arrangement had spread among family and friends, sparking whispers and judgment. Elena's parents called one evening, their voices laced with thinly veiled disapproval. "Is this really what you want?" they asked, not because they cared about her happiness but because they feared scandal. "You've always been so practical. Don't let emotion cloud your judgment." Clara faced similar scrutiny from her side. Her siblings teased her mercilessly, calling her reckless for getting involved with someone like Elena. "She'll never see you the way you see her," one of them said bluntly. "Why risk your heart for someone who doesn't believe in love?" Societal stigma added another layer of complexity. In their community, relationships between women weren't uncommon, but they were tolerated only when they served a purpose. Emotional entanglements? Those were seen as indulgent, unnecessary risks. Both women felt the weight of these expectations pressing down on them, forcing them to question whether they could carve out a future beyond their original agreement. Amidst the chaos, moments of introspection began to surface. For Elena, it started one late afternoon as she sat alone on the couch, staring blankly at an unfinished crossword puzzle. Her gaze drifted to Clara's sketches scattered across the coffee table. Each line, each curve told a story, not just of creativity but of resilience. Clara poured her soul into those drawings, unafraid to express herself even when the world pushed back. In that quiet moment, Elena realized something profound. Love wasn't weakness, it was strength. To open yourself up, to risk vulnerability, required courage. And maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong all along. Maybe her rigid beliefs weren't protecting her, they were isolating her. Clara reached a similar realization while sketching late one night. Her pencil hovered over the page as memories of the kiss flooded her mind. She thought about how Elena's hesitation had melted away, how her touch had been both gentle and fierce. There was no denying the connection between them, it was real, undeniable. And if there was even a sliver of hope that Elena might feel the same way, wasn't it worth fighting for? These reflections brought them closer to a turning point. One evening, as dusk settled over the city, Elena found herself standing outside Clara's bedroom door. She hesitated, her hand raised to knock but frozen mid-air. Finally, she tapped lightly, her voice barely audible. "Can we talk?" Clara opened the door, surprise flickering in her eyes. She stepped aside wordlessly, allowing Elena to enter. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, but neither looked away. "I've been thinking," Elena began, her voice trembling slightly. "About us." She paused, searching for the right words. "I don't know if I can do this, love, I mean. It scares me. But I also know I can't keep pretending that night didn't happen." Clara nodded slowly, her expression softening. "Me too," she admitted. "I've spent so much time running from pain, from rejection. But being with you, it makes me want to try again. Even if it's scary." They talked for hours, their voices rising and falling like waves. They discussed their fears, their hopes, their dreams for the future. Some disagreements lingered, but there was progress, a tentative step forward. By the end of the conversation, they agreed to take things slowly, to navigate this new chapter together rather than apart. As Elena left the room, Clara caught her hand briefly, squeezing it gently. Their eyes met, and for the first time in days, there was clarity, a glimmer of possibility amidst the chaos. Stay tuned, because while reconciliation isn't guaranteed, there's a spark of hope lighting the path ahead. Can they overcome their fears and build something real? Or will the weight of the world pull them apart? Rebuilding trust wasn't something that happened overnight. It was a process, slow and deliberate, built on small gestures rather than grand declarations. At first, the changes were almost imperceptible, a cup of tea left on the counter for Clara when Elena knew she'd had a rough morning, or a quiet thank you from Clara after Elena fixed a leaky faucet. These moments weren't earth-shattering, but they carried weight. They were proof that both women were trying, even if it felt clumsy or uncertain at times. As days turned into weeks, their interactions began to shift. Conversations grew deeper, moving beyond logistics to topics that revealed pieces of their inner worlds. One evening, while sitting on the couch, Clara shared a story about her childhood, how she used to dream of becoming an artist but gave up because people told her it wasn't practical. Elena listened intently, her expression softening as she realized how much courage it took for Clara to chase her passions now. In return, Elena opened up about her own fears, admitting that she'd always equated vulnerability with weakness. "You don't have to be perfect," Clara said gently, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "Just being here, just trying, that's enough." Their laughter became more frequent too, filling the house with warmth that had been absent before. Sometimes it was over silly things, like mispronouncing a word in a foreign movie or accidentally knocking over a stack of books. Other times, it came from shared inside jokes that only they understood. Slowly but surely, the walls they'd built around themselves began to crumble, replaced by a connection that felt genuine and fragile in its beauty. Mutual respect became the foundation of their relationship. They didn't always agree. Arguments still flared up occasionally, especially when old insecurities resurfaced. But what set them apart now was how they handled those conflicts. Instead of retreating into silence or lashing out, they talked, really talked. They listened to each other's perspectives, acknowledged their mistakes, and worked through challenges together. One symbolic moment stood out as a turning point in their journey. On a crisp Saturday morning, they decided to plant flowers in the backyard. Neither of them was particularly skilled at gardening, but they approached the task with determination. As they dug holes in the soil and carefully placed seeds inside, Clara joked about naming each flower after a memory they'd shared. "This one can be Rain Night," she said, patting the dirt around a daisy seed. Elena smiled, shaking her head. "You're ridiculous." "Maybe," Clara replied with a grin. "But isn't it nice to think these flowers will remind us of where we started?" The act of planting felt significant, not just because it beautified their space, but because it represented growth. Like the seeds they nurtured, their love required patience, care, and faith that it would bloom in time. Another memorable moment came during a sunset walk along the beach. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, casting a golden glow over the water. As they strolled side by side, Clara slipped her hand into Elena's, intertwining their fingers. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes. For Elena, it was confirmation that they were moving forward, not perfectly, but authentically. Their renewed commitment wasn't defined by perfection. There were still moments of doubt, still lingering fears about the future. But what mattered most was their willingness to face those challenges together. Their love wasn't flawless, but it was real, and sometimes, that was all that mattered. As they stood watching the sun dip below the horizon, Clara leaned her head against Elena's shoulder. "Do you ever wonder," she mused softly, "how different things might have been if we hadn't kissed that night?" Elena thought for a moment before responding. "I try not to. All I know is, I'm glad we did." Clara smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Me too." This transformation, their evolution from strangers bound by obligation to partners bound by choice, wasn't something either of them could have predicted. Love had found them in the most unexpected way, reshaping their lives and teaching them lessons they never anticipated. Stay tuned for the conclusion, where we'll explore how this journey has changed them, and how love continues to transform us in ways we never expect. The story doesn't end with a grand declaration or a dramatic finale. Instead, it closes with quiet certainty, a testament to the strength of what they built together. Elena and Clara aren't just roommates bound by an arrangement anymore. They've redefined their relationship, choosing each other not out of necessity but out of desire. Are they officially together in the traditional sense? That's left open to interpretation. What matters is that they've chosen to embrace the uncertainty of love, flaws and all. For Elena, the transformation has been profound. The woman who once saw relationships as transactions now understands that love isn't about control, it's about connection. She's learned to let go of her need for perfection, realizing that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's courage. Her journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. Clara, too, has grown. She's discovered that taking a chance on someone, even when it feels risky, can lead to something extraordinary. Together, they've proven that love isn't confined to logic or societal expectations. It thrives in the spaces between fear and hope, chaos and calm. As they sit together one evening, watching rain patter against the window, Elena reflects on how far they've come. She thinks about the night everything changed, the kiss under the stormy sky, and smiles softly. Life hasn't become simpler since then, but it's richer, fuller. And while there are still challenges ahead, she knows they'll face them together. Clara catches her smile and raises an eyebrow playfully. "What are you thinking about?" Elena hesitates for a moment before answering honestly. "Us. How different things are now." Clara grins, leaning back against the couch. "Different doesn't have to be bad, does it?" "No," Elena replies quietly. "Sometimes, it's exactly what we need." Their journey, from strangers bound by obligation to partners bound by choice, is a reminder that love has its own timing. It doesn't follow rules or adhere to plans. Sometimes, it sneaks up on you when you least expect it, changing your life in ways you couldn't imagine. And so, we leave Elena and Clara here, not at the end of their story, but at the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter filled with possibility, growth, and the kind of love that defies explanation. Sometimes, love finds you when you least expect it, and changes your life forever. Before we wrap this up, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you take a chance on love if it defied logic? Do you believe people can change, even after years of seeing the world one way? Share your answers in the comments below. We read every single one. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, love has a way of finding us, even when we're not looking for it.